All right, good morning and welcome to a new edition of Iyun Benzion, Yevamos Zion, number 7. We're going to talk today about two problems, two things that we've talked about previously, but just to explain them a little more. One is the concept of how the mechanism of how Esei Dochalosei works. We talked about in Daf Beis and Daf Gimel, how does it work, especially when there's kares over there. How is the essay dochalos shishbokars, or why it's not dochalos shishbokars, which is the maskan of our Gemara that essay is not dochalos shishbokars. How does it work? Is a pshat essay ain't essay dochalos shishbokars because it's so chomer, so therefore there's no mitzvah essay at all, or really the essay is dochalos essay, but because there's kares, we don't allow you to proceed. And the second thing we talked about yesterday was what's the difference fundamentally between mitzvah ba'aveira. Some the Gemara in Sukkah says lulav agazel, you're not yotze with. You're not yotze with lulav agazel. When you pick up the lulav and you're simultaneously kone it, you do a kinyan geneva, or you're making it into your reshuso. So therefore, you're not yotze the mitzvah of lulav because the mitzvah of ba'aveira, because it's like bringing a korban with a mum. It's a korban. The mitzvah of a korban has a mum. Piseach, it is a lame korban. So you're not yotze. What's the difference? Why Esei Dochalosei? We know that's clear from the Gemara on Daf Dalan and Daf Hey. We learn that Gedilim Tasalach, when you put on tzitzis that have kilayim, you're yotze mitzvah tzitzis. You're allowed to do that seemingly. Okay, so now I want to focus on this line in the Gemara, where the Gemara finally disproves the notion that Esei could be Dochalosei Bakaris. The Gemara says, "Well, there have a mean of our brayso we brought by Ritzi Mises based in. You allowed to kill someone on Shabbos." The Gemara says, what's the Havamina? The essay would be the Locha Dochalosei Sheish Bakaris. So the Gemara has a line over here. The Gemara says, in the middle of Zion and Aleph, Atu essay Dochalosei lav lota say Chomer mine, Vikasi essay Vidachile, Mali Chomer Zuta, Mali Chomer Rava. What's the difference? Any Lota essay is more significant, is more harsh, is more Chomer, more Chashuv, more important than an essay. Mitzvah's essay. If you don't do a mitzvah's essay, there's no punishment. But if you violate a mitzvah's losa essay, you get malchus if it's yesh b'maisei. So any losa essay. So the Gemara says, since the essay we know from tzitzis by kilayim, we're allowed to do the mitzvah of tzitzis even if you're wearing a beged of kilayim. So if the mitzvah essay pushes away a losa essay, which is always more chomer, so even if it's another chomra that it has, not just malchus, but has kares also, so reasonably we should say the essay is dochalish kares. And then the Gemara says, only talking about the havamina. The Gemara says really the Brisa was using a kal v'chomer, was not using losa kares. So that reasoning is disproved. So the havamina is the essay dochalish kares. What is that havamina? So, and then it's disproved. That's a maskana. The Gemara is disproved. So if you want to say the svara that essay dochalosei, it's dochalosei that's chomer mine, and therefore once it's dochalosei which is chomer, so it's docha even a losei sheish bakaris because mali chomer rabba, mali chomer zuta, even if it's a little more chomer, a lot more chomer, you'd have to assume that the logic would be the essay dochalosei is using a mechanism where it completely obliviates. The essay dochalosei obliviates. That's what we learned out of tzitzis. That tzitzis makom kilayim, it obliviates the isser. There's no isser. So once we know there's no isser by lo sheish chomer, so the Gemara is mali chamer rabba machem zuta. We have a mechanism. The Torah matired it. It's a matir. It's not just. It's a lashon docha. Docha means to push it aside. It actually matired it. So it matires even with kares. The Gemara says that's not the truth. The truth is we don't assume that. We're reading the Brisa based on a kal v'chomer, not based on essay dochalosei bakaris. So what's the maskana of the Gemara? So, like I suggested, we want to say the maskana of the Gemara is essay dochalosei is not because that it obliviates the losa essay. Essay dochalosei means simply that it pushes it away, which is the lashon docha, pushes it away. Meaning, when you put on tzitzis that have kilayim, you're doing the mitzvah. The Torah says it's better to put on the tzitzis, even though it pushes away the losa say. Meaning, and that's really explained by the Ramban al Torah, where he says that even though the Gemara has a havamina over here that losa say is more chomer. Really, Ramban says no, the essay is more chomer because it represents the Avos Hashem. Losa say only represents Yiras Hashem. Avos Hashem is greater. So really what we're saying is the Torah recommends you, and this is based on a Gemara on Daf Chaf, where the Gemara says we only say Esei Docha Lo Say when you have to say it, when there's no other way. If there's a way out, we wouldn't say Esei Docha Lo Say, which further so corroborates this notion. Esei Docha Lo Say means you're over the Lo Say. The Torah says there's no other options over here. You don't have another beg. You don't have any more tzitzis. You only have one with kilayim. It's better to do the mitzvah essay than do the mitzvah los essay. And even though you're violating, right? You're held accountable. You're violating los essay. The Torah says that's a trade-off. The essay is more important to do than the los essay, even though you get the los essay. And that's why it wouldn't be dochal l'sheish b'karis, because even though the Torah says it's more important than a los essay, but to be mechayev kares, the Torah says it's not worth it. It's not worth to do a mitzvah essay when you're going to be mechayev kares. That's too chomer. And there is a difference. Mali chomer rab, mali chomer zuta. That's why it would be a difference. It's more chomer. If that's true, and that's what we're saying, so to explain the difference in mitzvah ba'aveira and essay docha los essay, based on yesterday's Gemara, the Gemara says that by kibbut aveim, it's called a hechsher mitzvah, meaning when you prepare the food for your father wants food, he wants meat, and you have to cook the meat. So you're not mekayim mitzvah until you feed it to your father, put it on a plate in front of your father. So by the time you did the los essay, the mitzvah essay wasn't around. Mitzvah essay is after it. So that's not called mitzvah haba ba'aveira. Mitzvah haba ba'aveira is only when it's just based on this whole idea over here that really essay and los essay, when you essay docha los essay, you're still considered violated. You did an aveira. Torah says it's better to do the mitzvah, I say, than do even though you're doing a mitzvah los essay, well, even though you're violating los essay also. So that's only like the Gemara says in the Daf Chaf when you have no other options, when it's nitches, where it's the chuya. But we're going to assume the Gemara in lulav hagazel, when it says you're yotze with you're not yotze with a lulav hagazel, that's talking about when you have another option. You have another lulav. You could get another lulav. You're not making any effort, and you're just steal someone's lulav. You want to be yotze. So therefore, it's not push. It's not Torah never allowed you. The Torah never wanted you to do the mitzvahs of lulav when you have an option of not using a lulav hagazel. So therefore, use a lulav hagazel. That's called a mitzvah ha'avera because you have a different option. You have a different option. So therefore, why bring an animal with a mum to Hashem? You could bring an animal without a mum. But when it's the chuya, it's lashon esay docha los essay, when there's no other option, you only have one pair of tzitzis. You want to wear tzitzis. You want to be kind of mitzvah tzitzis, and it's a beged of kilayim. So the Gemara says esay docha los essay. The essay is more important than the los essay. But if you have another option, don't do it. It's not worth it. The Torah is telling you it's better not doing it that way. I hope you enjoyed today's shir. I hope we gave you clarity on this issue. See you tomorrow.